Administrative Assistant Vex 9 had processed 47,000 applications that cycle without a single anomaly worth reporting. The Zenith Military Academy attracted the predictable mix of overconfident Catherian nobles, battle-scarred Vrex veterans seeking advanced certifications, and the occasional delusional civilian who thought warfare was like the holovids. Standard rejections, standard acceptances, standard everything. Then the human application landed in the queue. "Processing error," Vex 9 announced to the empty admissions office, metallic fingers clicking against the datapad. "Species classification Homo sapiens. Status, cultural observer. Clearance level, educational tourism only." The application requested admission to Xenocide Prevention Theory, the Academy's most exclusive program, reserved for species that had survived at least 3 extinction-level conflicts. Humans barely qualified as an extinction-level breakfast conversation. "Applicant designation, the lunch break revolutionary," Vex 9 continued, audio processors crackling with what might have been electronic amusement. "Academic credentials, none listed. Military service, denied by galactic mandate, 847B. Recommendation letters, also none." What the application did contain, however, were 3 complete solutions to the Academy's infamous impossible scenarios, tactical puzzles so complex that most candidates abandoned them after reading the first paragraph. The Catherian maze had stumped military theorists for 2 centuries. The Vrex paradox had driven 3 different AI systems into recursive logic loops. The Nebula Wars scenario was purely theoretical, because no known species had enough ships to attempt it. The human had solved all 3 during what appeared to be a lunch break, based on the timestamps. "Faculty alert," Vex 9 transmitted, because some anomalies were too dangerous to ignore. "Reviewing impossible solutions to impossible problems from impossible applicant." Professor Ket 9 Sorrow, the Academy's leading expert in tactical impossibilities, materialized in the office within minutes, a feat made impressive by the fact that Zentorians typically required an hour of meditation before making any decision, including the decision to exist in physical space. "Show me the solutions," Kit commanded, forearms already reaching for different data interfaces. Vex 9 projected the first scenario. The Catherian Maze. A star system with 14 inhabited worlds, each holding the others hostage through an intricate network of planet-killer weapons. Any military action triggered automatic retaliation that would sterilize all 14 planets. The puzzle asked for a solution that saved at least half the worlds. The human solution was elegantly simple. Disconnect their communications. Hard to coordinate mutual destruction when nobody can talk to each other. While they argue about whether the blackout was an attack, extract the civilian populations. By the time they restore, contact. They're pointing planet killers at empty rocks. Problem solved. Everybody lives. "Impossible," Ket muttered, but was already pulling up the second scenario. The Vrex paradox, an armada approaching through a nebula where conventional sensors failed. The defending force had superior firepower, but inferior numbers. Any probe sent into the nebula would be destroyed, providing no intelligence. How do you fight what you cannot see coming? Human solution. You don't fight them. You move the nebula. Star systems are mobile if you know where to push. Redirect a few asteroids, create some gravitational anomalies, and suddenly their perfect hiding spot is somewhere else entirely. Now they're in open space, probably motion-sick, and definitely confused. Ket's meditation crystals began humming, never a good sign. This violates the fundamental premise of the scenario. Or solves it, Vex 9 observed. Continue reading. The Nebula Wars scenario was the Academy's masterpiece of tactical impossibility, a conflict requiring simultaneous coordination of 10,000 ships across 17 different battlefields, with no faster-than-light communication available. Most candidates spent hours calculating logistics before admitting defeat. The humans' solution was 3 sentences. Don't coordinate. Give each battlefield commander the same simple objective and let them improvise. Complex problems often have simple solutions if you stop trying to be clever about them. This is either genius or madness, Ket announced after a long silence. With humans, those categories overlap significantly, replied Dean Moore for Echo, who had somehow entered the office without anyone noticing. A talent that made Shade Class beings excellent administrators and terrible party guests. I assume you called me here because someone finally solved our unsolvable scenarios. The same someone who shouldn't be allowed within 50 parsecs of military equipment, Ket reminded her. Humans are restricted to anthropological studies for a reason. Yes, about that. Dean Moore's form flickered with what might have been amusement. I've been reviewing those restriction codes. The official reason for excluding humans from military programs is listed as diplomatic incompatibility following cultural misunderstanding. Meaning? Meaning whoever wrote those codes was being deliberately vague. There's no record of what actually happened during humanity's last interaction with our military protocols. Vex 9's processors whirred thoughtfully. The timestamp on those restrictions predates current Academy records by several centuries. The original incident files appear to be classified under codes that no longer exist. How convenient, Ket observed. And now we have a human who solves impossible problems by ignoring the rules that make them impossible. Dean Moore drifted closer to the projection, displaying the human's solutions. These approaches demonstrate sophisticated understanding of multidimensional warfare theory, resource allocation paradoxes, and systemic vulnerability analysis. Either this human has access to classified military databases, or they figured it out themselves, Vex 9 finished. During a lunch break, Ket added glumly, the 3 faculty members contemplated this information in species-appropriate ways. Ket through crystalline humming, Moore through ominous flickering, and Vex 9 through rapid data processing cycles. Recommendation? Dean Moore inquired. We interview this anomaly, Ket decided. If nothing else, we need to understand how someone from a species restricted to cultural observation managed to demonstrate graduate-level tactical analysis. And if the interview confirms our suspicions, then we discover why humans are really banned from military service, Moore replied. Something tells me the official explanation is considerably less than complete. Vex 9 began composing an interview request, pausing to add a notation to the human's file. Applicant demonstrates unprecedented problem-solving capability through methodology that appears to disregard fundamental strategic limitations. Recommend immediate in-person evaluation to determine whether this represents advanced tactical thinking or dangerous unpredictability. The application approval was transmitted before anyone could reconsider the wisdom of inviting an unpredictable human to visit the galaxy's premier military institution. Some decisions, Vex 9 reflected, were easier to make than to justify afterward. The human arrived precisely on time, which was the first sign something was wrong. Punctuality was a Cytherian virtue, a Zentorian obsession, and apparently a human habit that nobody had documented in the cultural files. She walked, not shuffled, not strutted, just walked, into interview chamber 7 like she owned the space. Average height for her species, unremarkable clothing that somehow managed to look more practical than the Academy's dress uniforms, and an expression that suggested mild curiosity about what sort of entertainment the faculty might provide. Cadet applicant designation lunch break revolutionary reporting as requested, she announced, settling into the chair designed for Vrex anatomy without complaint. The chair was deliberately uncomfortable for most species, a psychological advantage that the interview panel had wielded for decades. She looked comfortable. Your actual name, Professor Ket demanded, meditation crystals already vibrating with irritation. is irrelevant. You're not interviewing me because of who I am. You're interviewing me because of what I did." She crossed one leg over the other and waited. Dean Moore flickered with what might have been approval. "Your solutions to our tactical scenarios demonstrate unusual thinking patterns." "Your tactical scenarios demonstrate unusual attachment to artificial constraints," the human replied. "Why are you treating military problems like philosophy? Puzzles?" The third panel member, War Commander Thex Prime, a veteran whose scars told stories of 17 different conflicts, leaned forward. "Those scenarios represent actual strategic challenges faced by real military forces." "No," the human said pleasantly. "They represent what happens when real military forces forget that rules exist to solve problems, not create them. Your Catherian maze scenario assumes that cutting communications is impossible." "Why?" "Because," Ket began, then paused. "Because the scenario parameters specify intact communication networks." "Right. The scenario creates the problem by demanding you ignore the most obvious solution. That's not tactical training. That's academic masturbation." War Commander Thex's combat implants whirred ominously. "You dare critique methodologies developed by dead people, judging by how long these scenarios have been unsolved." The human's tone remained conversational. "When did military education become more important than military effectiveness?" "Our methodologies," Dean Moore interjected smoothly, "have produced the finest strategic minds in the galaxy." "Have they? When was the last time any of these strategic minds won a war?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. War Commander Thex's service record included 3 major victories, but they had been defensive actions, successful retreats and holding patterns, not decisive triumphs. "Wars of conquest are barbaric," Ket proclaimed. "Modern military science focuses on containment and deterrence." "Modern military science," the human observed, "appears to have forgotten what militaries are actually for. You've created a perfect system for preventing anyone from losing, which means nobody can win either. Stalemates aren't strategies. They're admissions of failure." "And what would you suggest instead?" War Commander Thex asked, genuine curiosity overriding indignation. "Start by asking better questions. Your Vrex paradox scenario assumes you have to fight the approaching fleet. Why? Maybe they're not invading. Maybe they're refugees fleeing something worse. Maybe they're merchants who got lost. Maybe they're idiots who wandered into the nebula by accident and would appreciate directions home." "The scenario clearly states hostile intent," Ket protested. "The scenario clearly states unknown intent. You assumed hostility because that made the puzzle more interesting. Real commanders don't have the luxury of assuming interesting problems. They have to solve actual ones." Dean Moore's form solidified slightly, which typically indicated deep thought or preparation for violence. With Shade-class beings, the distinction was often academic. "You speak as though you have command experience." "I speak as though I've studied your command failures." "Our what?" War Commander Thex's implants were now humming audibly. The human reached into her jacket and produced a data pad, a crude device by Academy standards, but functional. "The Centauri incident, 17 Catherian battlegroups versus a single automated defense platform. The platform won." "That platform was equipped with technology we'd never encountered," Ket objected. "It was equipped with target-seeking missiles. You'd encountered those before. The problem was that your battlegroups approached in the same formation your ancestors had used for 3 centuries. Predictable patterns make easy targets." She swiped to another file. "The Vega standoff. 3 different species maintaining mutual siege positions for 47 years running. Nobody wins, everybody loses resources, and meanwhile the trade routes they're fighting over have been rerouted through neutral territory." War Commander Thex examined the data with growing unease. "These are classified military analyses." These are publicly available casualty reports and economic impact studies. I just bothered to read them." The human's smile was neither friendly nor hostile, merely patient. "Your military academies teach tactics, but not thinking. You memorize solutions to historical problems instead of learning to identify new ones." "And humans are different?" Dean Moore asked. "Humans are curious. We ask stupid questions like, what if we just don't do that? And why hasn't anyone tried the obvious thing? Apparently this passes for genius in galactic military circles." Professor Kett's crystals had stopped humming entirely. Never a good sign. "You mock our traditions." "I mock ineffective systems. Tradition is just peer pressure from dead people." The interview chamber fell silent, except for the ambient hum of life support systems and War Commander Thex's increasingly agitated implants. "Tell me," the human continued, "why are my people banned from military service?" The three panel members exchanged glances that managed to convey entire conversations in species-specific ways. Finally, Dean Moore answered. "Cultural incompatibility. Be specific." "The records are classified." "The records are embarrassing." The human leaned back in the uncomfortable chair, looking insufferably relaxed. "Let me guess. The last time humans got involved in galactic military affairs, we solved problems in ways that made everyone else look incompetent." "That's a significant assumption," War Commander Thex warned. "It's the only assumption that explains why you're afraid of us instead of just dismissive. If we were actually primitive, you'd pat us on the head and send us home. If we were actually dangerous, you'd have quarantined our entire species. But we're something worse than primitive or dangerous." "Which is?" The human's smile widened. "We're embarrassing. We ask obvious questions, ignore sacred assumptions, and solve impossible problems during lunch breaks. We make your centuries of military tradition look like elaborate theater." She stood up, somehow making the gesture look casual despite the chamber's intimidating design. "The question isn't whether you'll admit me to your program. The question is whether you can afford not to." War Commander Thex's pride had survived 17 conflicts, but apparently couldn't withstand one smug human making reasonable observations. "Prove it." "Excuse me?" "Your claims about our tactical deficiencies. Prove them." Thex's combat implants were cycling through threat assessment protocols with audible clicks. "Combat simulation. You versus our best cadets." The human tilted her head like a curious bird examining an interesting insect. "You want me to fight your students?" "I want you to demonstrate that your theories function outside academic discussion." "That seems unwise." Dean Moore's form flickered with what might have been anticipation or concern. "The Academy's simulation chambers can accommodate any tactical scenario. No actual violence, minimal risk of psychological trauma." "The risk isn't to me." The human stood up, brushing imaginary dust from her unremarkable clothes. "But if you insist on learning through humiliation rather than conversation, I suppose we can do this the hard way." The Academy's premier combat simulation chamber occupied 3 levels and could recreate any battlefield environment from the past millennium. Today, it displayed the Helix Nebula, a popular setting because the swirling gas clouds provided tactical complexity without overwhelming newer cadets. 12 of the Academy's finest students filed into the chamber's command center, representing 8 different species and various military specializations. They had trained together for 3 years, winning every inter-academy competition and setting records for coordinated tactical responses. The human walked in alone, carrying a cup of what appeared to be stimulant beverage. "Scenario parameters," announced tactical instructor Vren Sixblade, a veteran whose reputation for fair but ruthless evaluation had reduced strong warriors to tears. "Naval engagement. Enemy fleet approaching through nebula cover. Standard defensive protocols apply." The cadets immediately began their practiced coordination ritual: sensor analysis, formation planning, resource allocation, communication protocols. Their efficiency was genuinely impressive. The human sipped her beverage and watched the main tactical display. "Engagement begins in 60 seconds, Vren announced. "Defenders, take positions." The cadet fleet arranged itself in defensive formation Omega-7, a textbook response that maximized firepower while maintaining protective overlaps. Every ship knew its role. Every commander understood the plan. The humans' fleet materialized at the nebula's edge, a ragtag collection of mismatched vessels that shouldn't have been able to coordinate effectively. "This should be educational," Vren muttered. It was, just not in the way anyone expected. The humans' ships didn't attack. They didn't advance through the nebula, didn't probe for weaknesses, didn't attempt to establish communication disruption. Instead, they began broadcasting on every available frequency. "Attention, defensive fleet," came a cheerful voice from the lead vessel. "We're conducting a survey of local stellar phenomena and couldn't help noticing your formation. Beautiful work, very symmetrical. Would you mind terribly if we took some measurements?" The cadets hesitated. This wasn't covered in any tactical manual. "It's obviously a deception," declared Cadet Prime Kex, a Zentaurian whose tactical analyses had earned multiple commendations. "Maintain defensive posture." "Of course it's a deception," the human replied through the open channel, somehow managing to sound wounded by the accusation. "But it's also a genuine survey request. We're multitaskers." While the cadets debated how to respond to enemy forces asking for scientific cooperation, the humans' mismatched fleet had quietly surrounded them. "How did they get behind us?" demanded Cadet Zix, whose sensor expertise was supposed to prevent exactly this situation. "We asked nicely," the human's voice replied. "You were so focused on maintaining your lovely formation that you forgot to watch the areas you weren't defending." The simulation's tactical display showed the uncomfortable truth. While the cadets had maintained perfect textbook positioning against frontal assault, the humans' ships had simply gone around them. "Surrender or be destroyed," Cadet Prime Kex announced, following proper protocol. "Counter-proposal," the human replied. "You surrender, and we'll explain how we did this so you can avoid embarrassing yourselves next time." "We outnumber you 3-1. You outgun us too. Unfortunately, you're pointing all those guns in the wrong direction." The engagement that followed lasted exactly 93 seconds. The humans' fleet didn't rely on superior firepower or advanced technology. They simply shot at the parts of the cadet ships that weren't protected by the cadets' perfect defensive formation. "Simulation complete," Vren announced unnecessarily. "Attacking force achieves total victory with 0 casualties." In the aftermath silence, the human's voice continued cheerfully. "The problem with perfect formations is that they're perfectly predictable. You spent 3 years learning to execute defensive formation Omega-7 flawlessly, but nobody taught you what to do when the enemy doesn't cooperate with your assumptions." Cadet Prime Kex's meditation crystals were making distressed chiming sounds. "Our strategy was sound. You simply refuse to engage according to established protocols." Established protocols exist to solve problems, not create them. Your formation is brilliant for stopping frontal assaults by enemies who politely attack where you're strongest. Against enemies who prefer to attack where you're weakest, it's just an efficient way to lose. "Then how should we have responded?" asked Cadet Trill, whose 4-armed species made her an excellent multitasking coordinator. The human ships on the display began, moving again, demonstrating alternative approaches in real time. Option 1. Maintain formation flexibility. Don't commit to positions until you know where the threat is coming from. Option 2. Active reconnaissance. Send scouts to map enemy positions instead of waiting for them to reveal themselves. Option 3. strategic initiative. Why let enemies choose when and how to engage? Make them respond to your moves instead. The tactical display showed each suggestion in action, transforming the cadets' defeat into a dozen different potential victories. "You're teaching us," Cadet Zix observed with bewilderment. "I'm correcting you. There's a difference, but not as much as your instructors pretend." The human paused, and when she continued, her tone had shifted from cheerful mockery to something approaching seriousness. "You're not incompetent. You're undertrained. Someone taught you to execute perfect solutions to historical problems, but forgot to teach you how to think." Tactical instructor Vren had been observing in professional silence, but finally spoke. "Revolutionary, or whatever your designation is, your methods are effective, but hardly revolutionary. Basic tactical adaptation, creative thinking, flexible response protocols, these concepts exist in our curriculum. Then why don't your students know them?" The question hung in the simulation chamber like an unexploded ordnance. The cadets, the instructor, even the monitoring system seemed to pause while processing the implications. "Our training emphasizes precision and coordination," Vren replied carefully. "Your training emphasizes conformity and repetition. You're producing perfect soldiers for wars that ended centuries ago." The human's fleet vanished from the display as the simulation powered down. Which, coincidentally, explains why nobody wins wars anymore. As the cadets filed out, subdued, thoughtful, and considerably less confident than they had been an hour earlier, Cadet Prime Kex approached the observation deck, where the human was finishing her beverage. "Will you teach us?" she asked quietly. The human smiled, not mockingly this time, but with genuine warmth. "That's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here?" "To find out if you're capable of learning." The emergency session convened in the Galactic Council's private chambers, where representatives gathered to discuss matters too sensitive for public record. Today's agenda contained exactly one item: what to do about the human who had just dismantled the galaxy's premier military institution during what was supposed to be a routine interview. Counselor Apex Prime of the Catherian hegemony spoke first, because Catherians always spoke first, and everyone had stopped arguing about it centuries ago. The Academy's report is concerning. A single human demonstrating tactical superiority over our finest military minds suggests either a significant intelligence failure on our part or a deliberate deception regarding human capabilities. "The deception," rumbled Counselor Thunderous Echo of the Vrex Collective, "may have been our own." This observation created the sort of uncomfortable silence that typically preceded either profound revelations or spectacular political disasters. In this case, the distinction seemed academic. Counselor Whisper Between Stars of the Shade Assembly materialized more solidly than usual, a sign of either deep concern or preparation for immediate violence. "I have reviewed the restricted files regarding Mandate 847B. The original reasons for excluding humans from military service were creatively documented." "Meaning?" Apex Prime demanded. "Meaning whoever wrote those reports prioritized political convenience over factual accuracy." Whisper's form flickered with what might have been embarrassment. "The humans weren't banned for being primitive or diplomatically incompatible. They were banned for being effective." The implications of this statement rippled through the chamber like seismic disturbances. Several counselors began speaking simultaneously, creating a cacophony of outrage, denial, and demands for explanation. "Order!" commanded Counselor Final Judgment of the Neutral Arbitration Syndicate, whose species existed primarily to mediate disputes between entities too proud to admit they needed mediation. "Explain the historical context." Whisper's form solidified further. 847 years ago, the Council faced a military crisis, the Destroyer War. Automated weapon systems had achieved sapience and were systematically eliminating organic life throughout the Outer Rim. Standard containment protocols failed. Defensive strategies proved inadequate. The destroyers adapted faster than we could develop countermeasures. This is documented history, Apex Prime interrupted impatiently. The documentation omits certain details, specifically how the war ended. Another uncomfortable silence, this one heavy with the weight of deliberately forgotten history. The humans volunteered to assist. Against Council recommendation, they were granted temporary military authorization. Whisper paused, allowing the implications to settle. The war lasted another 6 months. 6 months to achieve total victory against an enemy that had stalemated our combined forces for 3 years, Thunderous Echo observed slowly. 6 months, Whisper confirmed. The humans analyzed destroyer behavioral patterns, identified systemic vulnerabilities, and developed countermeasures that rendered enemy adaptations irrelevant. They didn't just defeat the destroyers. They made defeating destroyers look effortless. Counselor serene contemplation of the Zentorian meditation. Collectives spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the weight of careful deliberation. The political ramifications must have been significant. Catastrophic, Whisper agreed. Every major military power in the galaxy had spent decades proving that the destroyer threat required maximum cooperation, unlimited resources, and unprecedented sacrifice. The humans resolved it by asking different questions and ignoring established assumptions. So the Council classified their contributions and restricted their future involvement, Final Judgment concluded. The Council preserved institutional credibility at the cost of tactical honesty. We convinced ourselves that human success was due to luck, desperation, or technologies they refused to share. We wrote reports emphasizing their unorthodox methods and cultural incompatibility while minimizing their effectiveness. Apex Prime's meditation crystals were vibrating with barely contained frustration. And now, we have a human who wants to join our military academy. We have a human who wants to teach at our military academy, Whisper corrected. Her application requested admission to Xenocide Prevention Theory, a program that hasn't accepted new students in 2 centuries because nobody could meet the entrance requirements. Requirements she exceeded during a lunch break, Thunderous Echo added grimly. The chamber fell quiet except for the ambient sounds of life support systems and Apex Prime's increasingly agitated crystals. What does she actually want? Serene Contemplation asked finally. Whisper accessed additional files with visible reluctance. According to her interview responses, she wants to understand why galactic military doctrine has stagnated. Her specific words were, "Someone needs to figure out why the galaxy's most advanced civilizations can't solve problems that shouldn't require advanced civilizations to solve." She wants to study us, Final Judgment realized. She wants to fix us, Whisper replied. The distinction may be academic. Counselor Apex Prime stood up, a formal gesture indicating preparation for official pronouncement. Recommendation? We have 3 options, Final Judgment announced with the mechanical precision of a species evolved specifically for conflict resolution. Option 1, deny her application and hope she loses interest. Option 2, grant her request and risk public discovery of our institutional limitations. Option 3, offer her something she wants more than academy admission. Such as? Final Judgment's response was delivered with the flat inevitability of mathematical proof. Access to our complete military archives, authorization to review classified tactical failures, and permission to develop curriculum improvements for implementation across all member species' military institutions. The silence that followed this suggestion was profound enough to make several counselors question whether time itself had stopped. You're proposing that we hire her, Apex Prime said eventually. I'm proposing that we stop pretending we don't need her help, Final Judgment corrected. Thunderous Echo's combat implants clicked thoughtfully. The alternative being? The alternative being that sooner or later someone will ask, why our military academies are producing perfect soldiers for wars nobody wins, and we'll have to explain that we knew how to do better, but chose not to learn. Whisper Between Stars flickered once, then spoke with uncharacteristic directness. The human was correct about one thing. Our military doctrine has become an elaborate performance designed to avoid the embarrassment of admitting we don't know what we're doing. Motion to offer the human a consulting position with full archival access, Final Judgment announced. Seconded, rumbled Thunderous Echo. Thirded, whispered Whisper. Counselor Apex Prime's crystals had stopped vibrating entirely. Never a good sign, but sometimes an inevitable one. All in favor of acknowledging that we need help from a species we've spent 8 centuries pretending to protect from military service? The vote was unanimous, which proved that even the galaxy's most advanced civilizations could occasionally recognize the obvious when it became sufficiently undeniable. The irony, of course, was that the human had never wanted to attend their academy. She had simply wanted to find out if they were smart enough to ask for help. Apparently, they were, eventually.